The bad news is there are two sessions running right now. They're both great and you can't be at both of them. So that's a bit unfortunate. If you are interested in the room next door, the panel that's going on there in the Kekashan Hall is called Dialogue on Managing Talent in VUCA Times. And as I mentioned before, VUCA means volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous. This is the world in which we live. Unpredictability is the order of the day, and how to manage that is the subject of that conversation. So if you're interested in that topic, please go into the Kekashan Hall and you'll enjoy that. Here we're going to have a few more presentations and conversations around different issues. And may I remind you, ladies and gentlemen, just one final word. In the previous session, we had quite a lot of beeping and pinging and ringing going on. It would be nice if you could show some respect to our speakers by turning down your phones so that they can make their presentations unhindered. So, having said that, let's begin the session straight away. Our first speaker this morning, talking about strategic leadership, joining us from PTCL, is the President and CEO, I beg your pardon, Dr. Daniel Ritz. Please show your appreciation.
Good morning still. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Daniel Ritz, the President and CEO of PTCL. This is the incumbent telecom operator in Pakistan, serving the country since 70 years, since this nation was born. I've been asked to talk about strategic leadership. And I thought that's an easy topic because, you know, as a manager, that's kind of what you do. And then I said to myself, well, you know, what exactly is strategic leadership? And I went to the internet and I Googled, and I found this, and it kind of resonated with me. A manager's potential to express a strategic vision for the organization and to motivate and persuade others to acquire that vision. It kind of talks to the hard element, you know, the vision, the factual base, the vision, which has to do with the business, but it also talks about the manager, the leader. I prefer the word leader over managers because leaders lead as managers manage. The leader to be out there and to make others in the organization part of that vision. Because if I as the CEO have a great idea, and I'm the only one that has the idea and the only one that thinks it's a good idea, what use is it? What use is it is if only my management team and I share that vision? No use. Because at the end of the day, in our organization, PTCL has 20,000 employees across the country. They need to own that vision too. So, okay, strategic leadership is defined. Then I ask myself, what is a strategic leader now that we know what strategic leadership is? And I found this description. Works in an ambiguous environment on very difficult issues that influence and are influenced by occasions and organizations external on their own. And I read this again and I said, somebody wrote my job description. That's me. That's what I do. So it really resonated with me as well. Yeah? So I think now we have a definition, a working definition of strategic leadership and what strategic leaders do. Now let's see what it takes to be effective at strategic leadership. And we have to go a bit back in time to the origins of strategy and see how the world has evolved since and what it means for all of us. And actually, I take you back to the 5th century before Christ, to the ancient Chinese times. And you can read the quote by the famous Sun Tzu, who is accredited with the art of war. And he talks about tactics, and he talks about strategy. And saying the strategy is the stuff that nobody can see, but that's actually what matters. The tactics everybody can see when I conquer, but how I win, that's strategy. And it's interesting, when you go a bit into the history, you will find that strategy actually is derived from the Greek word strategos. I'm not very good at Greek, so I hope I pronounce it correctly. This term then somehow transcended through the times, and it came into the Western Hemisphere in the late 18th century, when Karl von Clausewitz, one of the big military strategists in Western history at least, talked about it and introduced it. And he talked about it as being the art of the general and the art of arranging troops. So the strategy that we talk about today all has its origins in military history. And the key elements at the time, of course, were to gather intelligence, what's going on, what's the enemy up to, what is going to be his next move, what is he going to do, and then giving orders from the general to the troops top down to execute. That's how we got started. And that somehow then also transcended into what we call strategic planning. You know, some of us that are as old as I am remember the 80s, and to some extent the 70s. Then I was still young, but I heard about it. You know, the big strategic planning departments. There were big strategic planning departments. Lots of highly trained, educated MBAs sitting in dark rooms without windows and building big models and predicting the future, right? And hoping then that the future would actually evolve as they predicted. So there's a lot about predicting the future based on historic trends, extrapolation, linear models, linear extrapolation, more complex ONR research, operations research models that we built to predict the future. And we did extensive data gathering and analysis, and we tried to find the answer to the future from the analytics of what happened before. And of course, this was a very hierarchical organization, so we would give top-down guidance and tell people what to do. That's what a strong leader did at the time. Now, the world around us has changed, ladies and gentlemen. I would say strategic planning is dead. Rest in peace. It's a thing of the past, not of the future. Why do I say that? When you look at what's happening around us, and we heard some of it in the talks this morning, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it in other talks, and you read about it in the newspapers every day. If you still read newspapers, maybe you read it online. Individuals, you know, the world around us is extremely complex and evolving. We have technology disruptions. You know, suddenly Apple came along and changed the way we consume music and the way we communicate. Innovation cycles are getting shorter. Customer behavior is extremely difficult to predict. One day they buy luxury goods, the next day they buy something very cheap. Their decision cycles are extremely short. Nobody knows what they're going to do next. We have economic shocks. We have socio-economic unrest. Lots of things are around us. So the ability that we have to predict the future is unfortunately quite limited. Some of us still try to do that, and most of us, including me, fail quite miserably at doing so. You know, when was the last time we did a 5-year strategic plan? And did it actually last for 5 years? Or did you rather the next year say, you know, scrap that, we'll do it again? Because our ability to predict the next 5 years is pretty close to zero. Now, what does that mean for how we strategize and lead strategically? You know, this is a term, it's not my term, I found it, and I think it works quite well. It's called adaptive strategy. Adaptive strategy. So rather than trying to predict the future based on analytics of the past, let's make experiments. Let's see what works on a small scale. Fail early, fail cheaply, learn and adapt. You know, if you look at the companies in Silicon Valley, the startups, they don't do 5-year strategic plans. No way. There's probably a reason why. We also move on in terms of data analytics versus data collection versus pattern recognition, because collecting data today is no more issue. We have big data everywhere. We have more data that we can actually use. So the challenge today is not to collect data and analyze it. The challenge today is to make sense of all the data that we have and recognize patterns. And also, I think the illusion that the smart person at the top called the CEO knows it all and can give orders to everybody else in the organization and they'll execute and they will be good. I don't have that illusion, you know. I'm not supposed to be the smartest guy in the company. I'm supposed to orchestrate a team that motivates others and drives the execution of our vision and our strategy. So, strategic planning is dead, long live adaptive strategy. That means in a turbulent time like ours, it's good to have a vision and a mission, because we can't maybe predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years, but we should have an idea of where we want to go. What is our vision? What is our mission? Why are we here? Why are we in business? And then cascade it down. Where do we play? Which problem do we want to solve? Because if you try to solve all the problems of all your customers, you're going to fail. You have to be quite precise and specific. Then the next step is about how will we succeed? What is our competitive differentiation? What is our USP? Our unique selling proposition? Let's be very clear about that, because if you're just a copycat, you're probably not going to be that successful. And lastly, what capabilities do we need? Because all the good things that we can write on a strategy paper and this debate in a boardroom is not going to happen unless and until we have the people to execute. And that's, quite frankly, I think where a lot of us are struggling. It's not a lack of good ideas, it's how do we execute? How do we make it happen? And then you see the arrows also going back. It's not just downhill, it's also back up. You need the constant feedback loops. Every day, every week, every month, what's happening in the field? What does it mean? How do we have to adapt? Remember, we talked about adaptive strategy. Now, enough of the theory. I want to just give you a very brief glimpse of PTCL before I close here. This is our vision and mission. That's the one that we have for PTCL. To be the leading and the most admired telecom and ICT provider in and for Pakistan. And there's a reason why we put not just in where we are, but also for Pakistan. Remember, I told you at the beginning, we've been here for 70 years. We've been here since the birth of the nation. And we want to give something back to that nation. So we're more than a telecom operator. We want to be here for the people in this country and not just operate in this country. Our mission recognizes that we're actually active in 3 markets. Of course, we serve our customers. We want to be the partner of choice. I'll be very upfront, that's not every time happening today, I know. We're working very hard to make it better, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. We're also in the market to develop people, because people today have a choice. Today they work for PTCL, tomorrow they work for somebody else. I want to make sure that they stay with us. So we need to invest in our people, we need to develop them. And lastly, if we do everything well, of course our shareholders should also benefit. Now, a glimpse of what's happening. If you ask me, are you there on your vision? No, we're not there, but we're working hard to get there. And here are some glimpses of what's happening at PTCL. For those of you that maybe still have the view that PTCL is the old incumbent that's kind of dull and a bit slow and not very reliable, we're working really hard to improve the network. We're working to upgrade our exchanges to give you 20 megabit per second speed at least, where the exchanges are upgraded. We're working hard on this, and over the next 2 years you will see many upgraded exchanges coming online in Islamabad and elsewhere in this country. We're working hard also to bring you more content, because if you have high speed, you say, okay, so what am I going to do with that? We are having partnerships with Netflix, with iFlix, with IBM on the cloud, so we're expanding the service offering that we have for you. If you have recently visited one of our new upgraded shops, now they actually look like a shop. Before they didn't, now they look like a shop. And I also hope that the people there are now treating you in a friendly and courteous manner. That's our ambition. And last but not least, we're also getting more active again in the sponsoring arena in Pakistan. Now, lessons learned, my last slide. Those are not from the internet, these are not official definitions, these are my personal learnings for what they're worth. In my view, as a leader, you need to have a strategic vision that touches the hearts and the minds. If you just touch people's minds, that's not enough. You need to also have that other part of the brain, the heart, the emotions, because that's what makes people work harder than they did in the past. Secondly, cascade your strategic choices down, learn and adapt as you execute. We have our vision, that stands, that sticks. I don't change my vision every week or every year, but the way I get there, I have to, we have to be flexible and adaptive. Strategic clarity is key. We have a lot of strategies that are very confusing because they talk about everything. We want to be digital and this and that, and tons of things. For me, strategic clarity is also about saying what you're not going to do. What you're not going to do, because that cuts off a lot of the noise that we have in our organizations. And last but not least, and that's also why I'm here today, amongst other things, you cannot communicate too much in your organizations. You can only communicate too little. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you so much. Strategic leadership in the context of all the changes we talked about this morning, an important subject.